Welcome back to Cow Park Rose. Jason and I are just finishing up our discussion about the fake school Bishop Sycamore.
Get it
Bishop
right.
McNamara is actually a real school with real graduates.
Have we confirmed this though? Have we confirmed that?
Jesus Christ.
I don't want to spread false information here.
Well, people, you are welcome to email us at cowparkrose@gmail.com if you feel that we have put out fake news. So
Dear God.
in this segment, we're going to be talking about the 20th anniversary of September 11th. Jason, it first off, I feel old as hell even talking about the 20th anniversary of 9/11. But also, I feel really emo because so much has happened. And I feel like I've got my own story to tell, but I also wanted to ask you, like, where were you when 9/11 happened?
So the hashtag that got created within the days after that happened, as we know now, was never forget or never forget 9/11 or something. Some variant of that was created, and it's still a thing. It gets brought up every year, which is good because we shouldn't forget. But with that in mind, I definitely can't forget that day. So again, this is Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. It was actually my day off from work. I was a car salesman back then. At that point, Tuesday was my day off, so I was ready to chill out that day. So I'd come downstairs a little, around 8:30 or so, watching TV. My brother's down there watching TV too. So we're flipping through the channels, of course, and as you're flipping through the channels, we come across one of the news channels. It might have been NBC, whatever, but they're reporting that a plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. And so we're watching this, of course, at the time we're thinking it was an accident, things happen all the time, like that. But we thought it was amazing because they were showing shots of the plane actually in the building, flaming and smoking and things like that. But while we're watching this stuff, which at this point had been a pretty decent amount of time for the morning, while they're showing the live coverage, they actually show the second plane flying into the other tower live. And I remember distinctly myself saying, "What the f?" Because, and then I look at my brother. I don't recall what he might have said, but I looked right at him, and in that moment of look, we didn't say anything to each other. We just looked like, okay, that this is not an accident. This is on purpose. And pretty much, for the rest of the time we were sitting down and watching TV, we didn't change the channel at all. The remote was down on the TV on the counter. We weren't changing the channel at all. If anything, we're flipping around to other channels to see what other news is coming out. And just remember it being in awe about what is going on here. Now, of course, over the course of the day, more news came out about the Pentagon stuff, another plane getting diverted by passengers going off in the field somewhere. But that day, I actually was going to take my mom to get a physical done to a hospital, and when we get to the hospital, of course, every TV in the place is on a news channel. All the nurses are have the backs turned to the counter, looking at the TVs, just wondering what's going on, things like that. Um, People are talking about, wondering about. I wonder, okay, they're attacking these things. Are they going to attack where I live? I mean, I live in St. Louis, or at the time I was living close to St. Louis. They're talking about, are they going to crash into the arch? Things like that. Or in
Yeah,
Chicago, they were talking about, oh, is Chicago in danger because of the Sears Tower? Blah 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 blah.
pretty much, Jason.
Yeah,
Um, any tall structure, I felt like, oh shit, they might be coming for us. I mean, at that point, I was still at Illinois State University. That would have been my junior year. Illinois State University is home to one of the tallest residence halls in the world. And yeah, we definitely felt affected, even though we weren't in New York, because it was like, okay, this is not just about New York. Like, yes, New York is being attacked right now, but right now, America is being attacked right now, and it's open fucking season. So I
which
absolutely felt. Um, I don't want to say that I felt afraid, but I was definitely like just awestruck at the loss of life, and the impact to those towers, because I had never seen anything like that. Okay. I, you know, us being '80s babies, we had seen the space shuttle Challenger go up in flames. Yeah, that was about a space shuttle taking off. One taking off and blowing up in space. That was not about planes hitting a structure with the size and scale of the Twin Towers. So I definitely felt like we were under siege at that point, and some was going down, and you know, you feel helpless. You know, you I'm pretty sure I kept my television on NBC. Like, you know, I remember Matt Lauer, and of course, Matt Lauer's rep has kind of taken a hit since then. But I remember vividly just leaving it on NBC because they kept replaying that first plane hitting. Actually, no, they kept replaying that second plane because I feel like nobody really has as much footage of the first plane as they do the second plane because people were literally trying to record the aftermath of the first plane hitting, and then the second plane comes, and it's like, holy mother of God, we are at war, whether we want to be or whether we thought we were or not. Shit, we are at war, and it's all hands on deck right now. So that definitely was a sobering experience. At some point, I kind of willed myself into walking into a class at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and because you feel like a zombie. Like, I feel like all I did was just watch CNN or NBC at that point, and I was looking for some semblance of normalcy. And walking on the quad and walking to school, and just sitting with my professor felt normal. It felt like something I should be doing. So that's where I was.
It's and it's interesting. I said this yesterday to you that it's interesting that people had that rationale. It's like, oh, they attacked the World Trade Centers. They're going to attack St. Louis next. That was a real thing. People actually thought that they were on guard, like get out of the area of the arch because this may happen. Which it's smart to be mindful of that. But looking back on it, in hindsight being 2020, it probably was pretty irrational for anybody to think that their locale was going to be attacked. Why would they bomb the arch? Why would they bomb the Sears Tower? Why would they bomb the residence hall in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois? But when that was going on, you had no help. No, you really had no choice but to feel that. As ridiculous as it might have sounds now, 20 years ago, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, that's what that moment had you thinking. It had you worried and scared, which I guess was the whole point of the attack in the first place. So they won with that. Great. They wanted to change America. Well, they did, but I think they changed it for the better. At least for the days after that, they changed it for the better. But one thing in the days, months, and years after that happened, and this is one thing I find so interesting is all the stories that came out about those people who, by one stroke of luck, or one difference in their day that they normally would have done every single day, they just didn't do it that day. But by that one stroke of luck or one lack of action, they found themselves not in that situation where they probably would have died.
Right.
And when I hear those stories, even I've always been that one person to realize that one single action in your day leads you on the path towards whatever's going to happen, which you don't know what it's going to be. Right. And we don't always know what those small actions are going to lead to, what the cause of those actions are. But in these people's cases, they know for a fact that because I didn't do that this morning, I'm still alive.
Yeah.
I mean, just a quick example, whether it be somebody who tried to get on a different train that they would have gotten to work, and they got there 5 minutes late, but they were in the building at the same time, they would have been killed with the rest of their coworkers, or a
Right.
guy who went to lunch with his coworkers in near the tower, who would have gone up to them up to the office once lunch was over or breakfast was over. Instead, he went back to his hotel room to put on a different shirt and tie and iron it. By the time he got out of this hotel room to go back up to the building, he came out to see one of the planes sticking out of the building. Or the case of who was somebody who was already in the building at the time, but they went outside to take a smoke break. And while they're riding down in the elevator, they heard the building jolt, like kind of jolt a little bit and shake. And when they came out from the outside to smoke their cigarette, they see the plane sticking out of the building. So, and also one I find the most interesting is I found a story of a flight attendant who typically would always, sign up to work a certain flight. But this one time she, wasn't able to get on it because she just happened to hit the wrong button. And by the time she realized it and tried to fix it, it was like a minute to 5 minutes too late for her to make the change. So she's riding into work one day with another person and found out that that person was actually going to be getting on that plane that she tried to get on. And she was kind of feeling mad and unhappy about not getting that flight until she met this individual and how excited that individual was to be going on the flight because it was a flight that everybody wanted. I think it was like going to LA or something like that. And obviously later on, she found out that plane that she would have gotten on had she not made that one wrong keystroke was one of the planes that flew into one of the towers. So I find that so interesting because not only the fact that you realize that by that one stroke of mistake in this case saved your life, but also it directly affected somebody else because that other person got on the flight that you would have been on. So now you know that it saved your life, but that person that you met, hours before is now deceased because he took your place.
Right.
So stories like that I find so interesting because how do you as a person process that? That knowing that this one small action is the only thing that saved my life. This one small action that I've done for the last 20 years because it just so happens I didn't do it on the one day on the morning of Tuesday, September 11, 2001. Because if I did that one time the day before on Monday, September the 10th, would have been no big deal. But if I had done what I was usually would have done that day, I'd be dead. How, as a human, do you process that and move on? And some of the people I've read said that for years later they still haven't.
Right. I
And
mean, you can't move on. And I mean, there's a whole psychology bit about survivor's guilt anyway.
exactly.
You know, you talk about, people in mass shooting situations, and you almost feel like sometimes they feel like I wish it was me because the grief of making it isn't the win in some ways that many people want it to be. You think about people like, "Oh, you're so lucky to be alive." I'm like, "I don't feel lucky. I feel fucking miserable." So, because
And
they have to deal with this just like the rest of us. I mean, the gut-wrenching stories, those cell phone calls for folks that knew they were not coming home that day. Like, I remember, uh, the weekend rather, that the 15th anniversary, there was a ton of coverage, there was a ton of specials, and I'm just like, "Okay, I don't wanna do this." And I think that's a very natural and okay response to not want to go through this because we've already been through this. We went through this as 20-year-olds. We went through this as 25-year-olds. We went through this as 30-year-olds, and now we're doing it as 40-year-olds. And I think for many of us, especially those of us who have children, the only reason we go through it again is because we feel an obligation to share and to inform and to curate and document this history, this painful history, because we don't want it to be repeated. but we also don't want it to be forgotten. And, everyone talks about, the 3,000 plus lives that perished that day, but a lot of lives have also perished after that in the name of retribution of that day, in the name of um, defending some of the actions of that day. And it is really, and especially with us literally just talking about the conflict in Afghanistan ending, where we asked the question, okay, was one man's head truly worth the pound upon pound of flesh that was given up? All of the American blood afterwards, all of the American money that could have gone somewhere else afterwards. We are left asking a lot of questions about how September 11th not only changed us, not only about how kids and adults have remembered and learned from this event. Hell, there's a lot of people who feel that we haven't learned anything from this catastrophic event. But I can assure you, for those of us that were watching on our televisions, because cell phones weren't that great in 2001, we can assure you, with no 5G, okay? That's the lesson we're going to have to tell um, our children, and in some cases our grandchildren, is that, guys, cell phones were not fucking cool in 2001, okay? It was the base model. It was the Nokia shit. And if you were lucky, you got a chance. Um, if you were on one of those planes or in one of those buildings, if you were lucky, you got out. But if you weren't lucky, you maybe got a chance to call someone and tell them that you love them. To me, that's why I'm not going to forget about September 11th. So, what about you?
Absolutely, Terrence. Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting how after all this time, stories come out that you don't realize were a story in regards to people who you might meet or just see on TV that they have a connection to September 11th when it comes to they had a relative close to them who was in the building, or they were a first responder who went to try to help people and they lost their lives because of that as well. Um, so it's almost like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon that I would say either you somehow you know somebody who has a connection to 9/11 and somebody who's involved in it, either death wise or who was just there in New York and was able to escape it. One other thing I will never forget too, beyond everything we talked about, is the images of the people who they were never in the building per se, but they're the ones who just happened to be bystanders outside watching. Might have been a witness to there in person, watching and listening to the plane crash into the building, watching the second plane crash to the second building. And I don't claim to be like an empath or anything, but I can definitely be empathetic to anybody experiencing that because I can't in some ways I can't imagine the feeling of because obviously we see that type of stuff on movies, on TV. You never imagine you're gonna physically witness that happening to a building that you're right there in earshot of and the eye's view of. And in some cases, that could be worse for some people because even though they weren't in the building, that alone could give you PSD from seeing the planes happen, seeing the building start collapsing while you're standing right there, having to run and avoid all the debris. Those people who couldn't run fast enough and couldn't escape it, and coming out covered in it so much that they looked like they were buried in it originally. But no, they were just there and couldn't escape it, so they're covered in it. And it's those images that I won't forget because it's part of the reason why it helps you realize a lot of things when it comes to just lessons in your own life. To say one, you really just have to live life, you know, live your life because God forbid anything like that ever happens to anybody else again, no matter what country you're in. But you just have to live your life because you just never know what's going to happen. And again, I cannot imagine even the people in those buildings when those planes were hit it. God forbid you were actually on eye level, seeing the plane coming at your building, seeing what's going to happen. You have no idea who's behind this. You just see a plane coming towards your building. You're trying to escape and get away from it if you can. I mentioned one of the stories where somebody, um, through stroke of luck, wasn't in the building. He was saying that almost 700 people from the people he knew in the area he worked at are dead. So again, they instantly lost their lives and they're just going to work that day. You know? And again, that's the lesson in that is you just never know what's going to happen. So you just have to live your life. I mean, it's good to be safe and cautious, but at the same time, you still have to live your life. Because in live it life the best you can, as wise as you can, as smart as you can, because you never know how much left of it you're gonna have. Not to make light of everyone that lost their lives that day, and like you said, in the aftermath after that, but it definitely makes you things like this make you help you appreciate life, and it's good to remember this stuff. I definitely agree with you too that for anybody who's dealing with this survivor's guilt, or if you lost a loved one during all this, that it probably is something you don't want to have to hear about every single year. And maybe once we get further and further away from this, the celebrations of this or the memoriams of this won't be as big deal. 20 years, I understand. It's definitely going to be a big deal. I get it. It's like a wedding anniversary. Those special numbers are going to be big things to celebrate. 20, 30, 40, whatever it may be. So maybe not every year it's going to be this big of a thing. So 21 may not be a big celebration memorial, you know. 25 might be, 30 may be. But maybe those numbers in between will help push us away and make it a lot easier to remember them every 5 years, 10 years, so forth, as opposed to every year that seemed like we celebrated back then when it first happened. There was definitely a thing year one, year two, year three, four, five, as it should. But again, as we get further away from this, 30 years from now, it should be remembered. But question to you to more expound on a little bit is, as I mentioned to you the other day, that your kids, as you mentioned, weren't alive when it happened. The oldest one wasn't too far removed from when it happened, but even still, at what point can they really grasp what actually happened, how it affected the country? 'Cause like you said, 2001 was a whole different climate in general than it is now. So obviously, your kids, like I said, you have three of them. They're different kind of spectrums of age. So I'm very curious of how anybody who is that young and probably doesn't how can you really grasp at that age what really happened that day, how it affected anything, because you weren't really alive. So I guess what I would ask you is what kind of questions, if any, did any of the three of them ask you or the wife when it comes to when this was brought up to their attention that it happened? What kind of questions did they initially ask you guys when it comes to what is this about, or if did they ask any questions at all?
They didn't really ask as many questions. We really just wanted to like expose them and let them make up their own minds about what actually happened. Because I feel like, it's very common in our age bracket for parents to kind of sanitize the existence of their children to the point that they never ever actually like experience life. Like they never have a bad day. They never actually hear about some of the horrible things that have gone on in the world. I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that me and my better half, like, we've had the opportunity to go on vacation and we've had to explain to them, hey, you know how you like to make like pop gun sounds? Yeah, we can't do that shit because there was a shooting last night in Orlando, and we're about to walk into Disney World, and these people are going to be fucked up about it. So you got to be mindful of your surroundings. Oh, and by the way, an alligator ate someone's kid last night. Again, we have typically shot really straight with our children about what's going on in the world. We typically have not minced words. Some parents don't do all that. And that's why they're so blissfully fucking unaware today. It's one thing they're four, but then sooner or later they're 14 and they still know how the fucking world works because you sheltered them so much. So Um, Fortunately, Christy and I have not done a lot of that. That's not to say that they haven't earned the right to be children. God knows that they have, but we've also not insulted them, and we've simply explained to them, "Hey, here's what's happening in the world." And I feel like September 11th, it was no different. Like, we did not sanitize that experience. It was horrible. It is horrible. It will always be horrible, and that is why it shall remain unsanitized. So, just my 2 cents on that.
Well, your opinion is worth more than 2 cents, buddy. But yeah, man. Although the memoriam events like this, as far as the 20-year, although going forward they're probably more spaced out, um, they'll still get remembered. Of course, 21. The news stories aren't going to just disappear just because it's 21 and not 30, or not because it's 20 anymore. It will be talked about, and I think that will help with never forgetting. But I think the fact that at least for you and I and people of our general age area, like I mentioned yesterday, and I warned you about that ice in the cup, by the way. But
Well, it's a rather unsobering event.
fair enough. Get you a plastic cup. But
Yes, sir.
but I lost track of this. I see you maybe lose track where I was going. See, look at you. No. So I think because of the fact that we went through it, we're never going to forget. Like I mentioned the other day, that this a lot of people can take a lot of other events that were alive and then back then, like the JFK assassination, the MLK assassination, bombing of Pearl Harbor. They're always going to know where they were at when this stuff happened because it was a big deal for them when they were alive. When they were our age or old enough to remember it at least. And for 9/11, that's going to be our event. That for a lot of people, they're probably never going to forget. They may not know their entirety, detail for detail, their entire day, like I do or you do, but they're probably going to remember where they're at, what they were doing when those attacks happened on the towers, or at least when they heard about them happening that day. Because again, it's a day I'll never forget. I can probably go detail to detail from when I woke up to went to sleep that night about the whole day itself, just because that was a huge deal, or even the next day. So yeah, man. We'll never forget. Hashtag that never forget. Hashtag never forget 9/11. There you go.
Yeah. Here. I also think I don't really feel like this is going to turn into an every 5 year thing or an every 10 year thing, because ultimately we're coming up on the year where, ironically, all of those 9/11 babies, the children that were effectively born on November 11th, I'm sorry, not November 11th, that were born on September 11th, 2001, those kids are becoming men and women now. They are grown-ups now, and they have seen some shit, okay? They have seen they have only heard about 9/11, but they have gone through COVID. So they have a story to tell that is their own as well.
Facts.
So, all right. That concludes our coverage of the 20th anniversary of September 11th. Coming up next, we're going to go over observations and omissions and close out the show on Cal Park Bros.